D&D, the world's greatest role-playing game. I've been playing for years now, and nothing gets me more excited than making a badass character or monster. And video games and anime provide the perfect inspiration for this. I mean, look at this stuff. But then you look at the game, and what you get is something like 4 Elements Monk?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Seriously, what am I even supposed to do with this? 4 key points for Burning Hands? Come on!
We'll have to make some major changes around here.
Welcome to the table. My name is Ian, and this is Incendium D&D. Today, we're gonna hack Dungeons & Dragons. Item number, SCP-538. Object class, Euclid. Special containment procedures. All instances of SCP-538 are to be contained within a flush white 15 by 15 by 3 meter room with no fewer than 4 overhead 200 watt lights. These lights are to be centered above a 1 by 2 by 0.5 meter block table stationed in the center of the containment area and shining at all times. 1 Class D personnel in a chemically induced coma is to be kept medically stable upon the table, and will serve as the feed source for all specimens of SCP-538. No source of shade should be present in the room, other than that provided by the Class D. If at any point a light in the SCP-538's containment area burns out, a crew of 2 personnel are to be sent in through an adjacent airlock. Personnel are to be equipped with sealed hazardous material suits, complete with independent oxygen tanks, and advised to move slowly and deliberately in order to avoid agitating SCP-538. They are to replace the burnt-out bulb and, upon completion of their task, are to return to the airlock. Once personnel are isolated within the airlock, they are to be flushed with 300 watt white light in order to assure no instances of SCP-538 are clinging to their person. Examinations of Class D personnel providing sustenance for SCP-538 are to be done in a similar manner. However, only 1 doctor is required for examinations. See Addendum 538-A. If at any time all 4 lights are to go out simultaneously, the chamber is to be sealed along with all observation ports. Until means of relighting SCP-538's chamber are available, the containment area is to remain in lockdown. If at any time personnel are bitten by SCP-538, the infected individual must be placed within SCP-538's chamber as soon as possible. Failure to do so could result in a massive breach of containment and will result in termination of responsible individuals. Note: security personnel are periodically screened for any unusual phobias. Any personnel found to exhibit any degree of arachnophobia is to be reassigned. Hello everyone, my name is Ian and welcome back to D&D Hacks here on Incendium RPGs. Before we get too far into this, I want to say that if anybody has arachnophobia, you're probably going to want to skip this video. Sorry about that. The last entry we made was for SCP-035, the Possessive Mask. Manipulative, corrosive, and dangerous, this mask was definitely an interesting one to stat. Some people suggested that I actually turn it into a magic item, but I do think that it works better like it is. For those of you who are new to the SCP universe in general, here's what you missed. If you're already familiar with it, you can click the timestamp in the description or the comments below, or skip to the timestamp on the screen in front of you. Dating back to 2007, the Creative Commons universe of the SCP Foundation catalogs a multitude of monsters, items, and phenomena which pose variable threats to human society. These anomalous objects are designated as SCPs and given a number which represents the order in which they were found. They can range from dangerous to adorable, and are classified in terms of difficulty to contain. Their powers can be anything from distorting reality to indestructibility, to being the literal embodiment of happiness. And the secret global organization, only known as the Foundation, has taken up the daunting task of protecting our world from them by any means necessary. Think Illuminati, but modern and scientific rather than mystic and arcane. Thousands of tragedies have been stopped thanks to their hard work, but as more and more SCPs are discovered, end-of-the-world scenarios are never far. Dungeons & Dragons is a TTRPG in which you can do anything. You work alongside your players to design a game for everyone to enjoy, and as the DM, you get to make the decisions on what kinds of NPCs, monsters, and gods appear in your world. SCPs can make for some amazing inspiration. Generally, they fit best in the context of horror or mystery, but they can be comedic or tragic as well. The sheer anomalousness of these creatures leaves room for a whole new world of storytelling at the table. A statue that breaks your neck in the blink of an eye. An old man with a pocket dimension full of death traps. A hard-to-destroy reptile with a penchant for hatred. With a roster like this, it can be difficult to bring faithful adaptations from the SCP universe into our campaigns. But all of that ends today because we're going to be converting yet another SCP into a 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons monster. Before we really get into this video, it's time for our subscriber roll-off. I'm going to roll a persuasion check with this d20 here, and you guys get to roll against it to set the DC. This is the festive Poly Sunburst dice set from Chessex, which I got for Christmas this year. It looks pretty nice. I like the red numbers, and the yellow isn't too bad at all, although it does kind of look like cheese. Anyway, let's get to it. For all of you who rolled below a 15, welcome to the channel. What's worse than a swarm of venomous spiders creeping through your house at night on the hunt for unsuspecting prey? SCP-538 takes that to a whole new level. These animated shadows belong to an unknown type of arachnid and attach themselves to the shadows of other living organisms to feed off of them. Feeding like this increases the shadow's size, up to a maximum of 15 square centimeters. For you Americans out there, that's almost 6 inches on a side, basically the size of your hand. It's normally painless when they feed on you, and as long as the host doesn't make any sudden movements to startle SCP-538, it will simply feed and move on. However, things get dicey when the spider's shadow feels threatened. When SCP-538 defends itself, it quickly bites its opponent and flees as soon as possible. The bite has to occur on skin, or nothing will happen. Upon being injected with this creature's venom, the individual will go through 5 different stages of infection within the space of an hour. First, they'll become irritable and agitated by people around them. After about 10 minutes, they'll start sweating and get the chills, while their body becomes flushed with heat. Nearly half an hour into the infection, they'll become violently aggressive, attacking those nearby. Their speech becomes slurred and their movement becomes impaired. Later, they become apologetic as their body temperature drops significantly. The subject will retreat to a secluded, dark area. Once an hour has gone by, the infection will lead to the subject... Well, the article has redacted the information, but the subject clearly expires. Their shadow dissolves into a new swarm of SCP-538, approximately 4 square centimeters in area. And I know what you're thinking, but unfortunately killing the subject in advance does not prevent the ultimate condition. In fact, it directly results in the final stage, and there is no cure. Before we start working on the stat block, let me know what other SCPs I should work with. I've been using SCP Series 1 and 2 lately, so give me all the suggestions you've got and maybe I'll do that one next. I will say I have been doing godlike SCPs lately, like SCP-682. However, I thought this would be a nice break from that classification of objects. Creating swarms of creature can be difficult if you've never done it before. So before detailing the stat block of SCP-538, I consulted Sly Flourish's guide on designing swarms, which you can find in the links below. There were 3 major points that I had to take into consideration. First, the hit points. The hit points depend on the number of creatures in the swarm, as well as their challenge rating. A single instance of SCP-538 isn't very threatening, but what about 50 of them? 100? In this case, I decided each spider has 1 hit point, and used the hit point pool from the Cave Fisher, another infamous spider of 5th edition. This gave the swarm a total of 58 hit points to work with. The next major points concern the swarm's natural traits, as swarms are a special classification of monster in 5th edition. Swarms, when reduced to half HP, do less damage, making them unique and interesting encounters. Lastly, for these points, we have to add the swarm trait, which says the swarm can occupy another creature's space and vice versa. The swarm can't regain hit points or gain temporary hit points. This effectively gets across the idea of the swarm being fluid in a way. You can move through the swarm, although I don't recommend it in this case, or reposition without being forced to use the overrun action from the DMG in order to get past them. Continuing off of the Cave Fisher stat block, I've borrowed its AC of 13 and its ability scores. Strength is the highest, followed by Dexterity and Constitution, while the mental stats are left in the dust. I think some of these might even prevent certain spells from working on SCP-538 actually. The main thing I changed in these areas was the speed, which would normally be 20 and 20 for walking and climbing. Now it's 50-50. According to the article, these things can really zoom. For vulnerabilities, resistances, and immunities, I borrowed these from the Shadow. Shadows are particularly hazardous to a party that has no source of radiant damage. Just look at the Death House in Curse of Strahd. Like most undead, they have resistance to acid, cold, lightning, and thunder alongside the physical damage types. Radiant damage is lethal to them, however, which makes sense as SCP-538 can only be damaged by high-powered light in the article. Of course, that's not entirely balanced for our game, especially at challenge rating 5, which is why I've taken a few creative liberties. They don't speak any languages and have a blind sight of 60 feet, no hiding from these creepy crawlies, and they have immunity to charmed, frightened, paralyzed, petrified, prone, restrained, and stunned, as all swarms do. Whenever SCP-538 makes an attack, it gets to feed on a hit. When it does this, the swarm's size increases. Imagine fighting a swarm that seems to be increasing in size as you try desperately to destroy it. I've also given it a special trait called New Brood, which is particularly brutal as it mimics the article's description closely. If a creature dies while poisoned by the swarm's bite, their body becomes a new swarm of SCP-538 after 1 minute, unless resurrected through a spell such as Revivify. This is something that you see in other undead stat blocks that allow them to raise the player character's corpse from the dead to fight on their side. And I feel like this is what makes the challenge rating so high for a seemingly simple monster. SCP-538 has a way to inflict permanent death on a player character, so as a game master, it is up to you to make sure you approach this carefully. I would use an NPC to show the consequences of dying to this encounter, unless your players are just really excited to have a bad time at earlier levels. Moving on to actions, the swarm can make one attack against all creatures within range. That's right, if you're in range of this creature, you can get attacked by it no matter what. That gives this monster the potential to attack every single person in your party all on one turn, and potentially poison each of them. This rewards the players who keep their distance the most, but it can still be problematic if the swarm grows to its huge size, as it does have a 50-foot move speed. This attack, a bite, does some simple damage, but has a randomized effect based on the PC's constitution and the luck of a die roll. Rolling a d6, a 1 to 2 results in them taking a little bit of extra necrotic damage. On a 3 to 4, the creature becomes blinded until the poison condition ends. On a 5, they become paralyzed until the condition ends. And on a 6, they drop to 0 HP and are unconscious. And if the swarm chooses to attack again, that new brood trait might come into play sooner than you think. This has the potential for being a very lethal encounter if the luck of the die is against you. So use your best judgment, GMs. And that's it. Our two-dimensional Arachno Terror is done. I imagine the encounter going something like this. The floorboards creaked underfoot as you and your party carefully trod your way through the old house. Its caretaker had died here a few days ago, and a month before that, the young couple who lived here had met a similar fate. People in town spoke in hushed tones about this place, calling it cursed, haunted. But you knew better. There were no signs of ectoplasm, nothing to indicate a spirit or ghost. The clues were few but telling. Shadowy, strange cobwebs were draped over the furniture. The house sat on a fault line leading into the Underdark. No sounds besides your own could be heard in its halls. You made your way into the basement, where cracks spread across the stonework. As you kneel down to investigate, you hear a stifled scream from a party member behind you. You turn to see them rubbing their shoulder in pain, and their skin has become pale and sickly. You see the shadow of a spider on the floor latched onto their shadow. Before you can get a closer look, your comrade points behind you, and you turn again to see a swarm of spider shadows pouring out of the cracks of the basement. Thank you again for joining me on this installment of D&D Hacks. I really appreciate all the support we've been getting lately on this channel. Make sure to check out the SCP Wiki article in the description below, and if you like this video, let YouTube know by commenting and liking the video. SCPs are often horrifying, unkillable creatures with inexplicable abilities. Maintaining the balance of the game while being true to their nature and theme is an incredible challenge for any dungeon master. That's why most people just choose to keep these worlds separate. But I think they can still serve as great inspiration for encounters, and as long as we combine their unique features while weighing out the rest of the stat block, you and your party are guaranteed to have a great time against them. I hope you enjoyed my take on SCP-538, the Shadow Spider. Happy hunting, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.